Aduro had a press release on Thursday about the start of commissioning of R2 for plastic. And so I thought it would be a good idea to bring Mina and Ofer to talk about it, give us some light as to what it means. So with that being said, thank you, Mina and Ofer, for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Maris. Nice to be back again.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
Okay, so let's start off. Can you actually explain what the commissioning means? Because maybe some of us don't know. And also, when can we see feedstock being processed via R2?
The commissioning of the R2 is a day for us, of course, of a celebration. We've been working in the last year or so to build this project. It's one of 4 other projects that we've been taking, and I can remind the audience how complex that journey was. And from us, the turning point is actually that we're moving from, let's say, maybe testing material without the issues of continuation to a continuation process. So that means that everything that all our thesis, everything that we've been doing in the lab is now coming to a motion state, and we're starting to move material from one to the other. That is, of course, in the eyes of the investors, a really significant point. This is a significant point also from our perspective. However, very, very important to say, I think, Mariusz, is that while we're working on the commissioning of R2, the work at R1 is never being stopped. Like, we have enough work and a lot of work in R1 as we're moving forward, and so we don't see somewhat of us holding on and spending time on finishing in R1 and then moving to R2 and actually moving to R3. But I want the audience and the investors to understand that we're running PE and PP and polystyrene day in and day out in the R1, and it's like a continuation. We will continue to work on R2, and we will run some material in different stages as we see fit, and we will run some materials in R1 to help us plan the R3 as well. The largest
by R1, do you mean the batch process?
The batch processes. So I call the R1 as, people now understand it, and these are our internal terms, and they came up public and everyone understand them. This is the work done in the lab, and outside of the lab there is a continuous process that we're moving, and later we're moving into, of course, the system, really the ton per day. But it's really important for me, from my perspective, for the audience to understand that none of it is isolated. Where we run, we have enough information in R1 to know that we will continue and run it in R2, but we are now surpassed some of the work in R2, and we're now using R1, for example, to plan for the continuous flow. So it's a continuation of work. It's not like, we've done some work in R1, we stop everything there, now we're doing in R2. No, this is layer after layer after layer that moving forward. Every time that we are doing experiments in this process, it's really it's our improvement towards the scale up, really. And we haven't seen anything up to this day, as I mentioned, that prevent us from being successful on this.
Why is R2 important for the company and also for potential clients?
It's really the turning point where you are moving from you start moving material continuously. From that turning point in their mind is the place where you could scale up. But we should understand some of what does it means and why our optimism that we will be successful. This system, or the technology that we are developing, has so many ways for adaptations, right? We're testing different catalysts. We're testing different hydrogen donors. We qualified all of those. We're working in the lower parameters. So from our perspective, it's the integration of those parameters that move forward. And so that is a transition. But the optimism that we all share is that we're doing it in a lower severity, lower conditions, with multiple ways to do it. And so we think that this should be successful, highly successful. On the other hand, in the eyes of the investors, in the eyes of companies, they do need to see it moving forward as a transitional, to something that you can scale up. And from my perspective, the moment that you're doing it in continuous, that is why it's so important for everyone, and of course for us as well.
Is commissioning process like testing to make sure everything works, and like how long does the commissioning process usually take?
So of course we didn't report it. We only report it now, but the commissioning process starts several weeks ago. When we finish assembly it, we test the system to pressure, and we test the system to different certification that we need to do. And now when we wire the system, we are now looking for all the faults that can be, and there are faults sometimes that you find, some connection and mismanagement of heat transfer and all kind of an issues. So what we're doing now is learning maybe the system, how to really operate it. So when we will run hydrocarbons, we will do it as smooth as possible. But also just noted that this is a phase where we learn how this machine is operate, right? So when we do that, we gain a lot of information going forward in our thinking. What needs to be considered? What needs to be thinking? How do we need to improve our designs? You know, if you just even, you know, small operation of you clean the reactor, you don't clean the reactor. What is happening in the process of that? So all of this is moving forward as data towards the commercialization. Every step is so important. So I know the investors are locked up on the commissioning, but this is all a bundle of information that we need to use to improve in a continuous way going forward towards the commercial phase.
What happens after you are done with this process of learning? And I mean, what can investors look for after the process is finished?
Yeah, so we will run different types of material inside, and we will run, you know, sometimes it will be a single material, sometimes it will be a mix. We won't even communicate to the investors day in and day out exactly what we've been doing, but we will do all those testing. We will run them in different streams, in different pressure, in different conditions. We will learn how to optimize our work. And at some point of time, we will or even run multiple streams of mixture of plastics. And you know, we already have in our mind what we need to be anticipated and what we should expect to as a goal, because we've done those results in the previous testing. So we have we do have something to look forward to see it. The general concept of people will come and see material comes in and material comes out. We understand it, and we will cater to that at some point of time. But the testing that we're doing now are, you know, execution is everything, and we need to learn from what we're doing right now towards planning of the commercial unit, and that's dictate actually our going forward, our experimental plan.
Another news that you had was about closing the private placement, and also you started off with $2.5 million private placement, and then you upsized it to $4 million. Can you explain, why the increase?
So this is a day of excitement, and I really want maybe Mina to give you a better answer, I guess. But for me saying yes, it's full trust of the investors that believes in what we're doing.
Absolutely. And Mariusz, let me give you the answer in three different parts. So look, the first part ultimately is, of course, when you plan a raise in terms of the timing and the amount, you need to make sure that demand is there, right? So we absolutely had very strong demand for a raise, and we found it a very opportune moment for us to contemplate going down that path, right, of raising funds. Of course, we started at $2.5 million. We increased it to $4 million, mainly driven by the demand. But there's other components that might be missing here from the investor's vantage point. The other part to this question is the fact that 2023 has been very, very challenging from a capital market standpoint, right? So raising capital has been very difficult for many companies. I'm aware of several companies out there actually been struggling to raise even $1 million. So we're lucky not to be in that position. But companies that are perceived to be in need of cash or funding anywhere in the near term, whether it's 6 months from now or 9 months from now, they're all being penalized, right? So irrelevant of your execution as a company, if you are perceived to need money in 2023, people are basically penalizing your stock price based on that. So we wanted to take that element off the table. We wanted to strengthen our balance sheet and cash position. So we made that strategic decision, of course, to bring in the cash that we chose to do. Now, the third component, which is, in my opinion, quite important, people need to realize that the money that we're raising today, we actually want to leverage that and raise additional non-dilutive funding. And I'll give you an example using R3. So let's say R3, we're approaching, and we mentioned these parameters before. Let's say we're approaching a government institution, a funding partner to provide a grant funding for a third of the cost of R3. One of their main criteria to proceed forward is for us as a Aduro company to actually have the other 2/3 of that funding on hand, or at least a very clear line of sight to get that money. So they want to ensure, as they give you 1/3 of the money that you'll need down the line, that you're going to see that project to fruition. You're going to complete the project, and you're not going to be missing some of that component that you're supposed to come with internally. So this $4 million that we raised today, and of course we're forecasting additional money coming in from the warrants that are being exercised, it's going to help us actually leverage and build more of a war chest on top of that through non-dilutive funding. So those are really the three components that we look into when we made the decision. I'd like to, I guess, clarify another point, right? Since going public, we've done smaller raises. Let's call it sub $2 million. Of course, the top criteria for us at that point was to always protect the interests of every investor that trusted us with their hard-earned money, right? We maintain that as a top criteria even to this day. So every time we raise money, we make sure that it's done at the right price, in the right environment, and that we can take that money and unlock more and more value for the company as a whole and for all their shareholders. So we, as a company, of course, need to balance all of these different perspectives when we make the decision. Ultimately, I think showing that we have demand for up to $4 million in this current environment shows a very, very strong support from our shareholders. I'd like to say, when I say there's strong demand, every single person in this round is somebody that I've either communicated or have communicated in the past with. And, we've seen a lot of recurring investors that have come in previous rounds, but we've also seen a lot of new investors that have been discussing or talking to us as a company for the past 6 to 9 months. I've done tremendous amount of diligence, and I've been very supportive of the company moving forward. So I honestly think that the current shareholders are going to be joined by very loyal additional new shareholders in this round, and we couldn't be more pleased with the outcome that we're seeing, as we speak.
It has taken Aduro about 14 months since the third-party validation to get to the commissioning of R2 plastics. What were your key learnings throughout the journey?
Thank you for the question, Marius. I'd just like to point out that in the last 14 months, we have been taking actually 4 projects, not one. All of them are meaningful, and in the name, on behalf of working for our investors, I'll remind the people we took on the increasing of the lab to build the space. We have worked to complete the flash drum unit, and we've been taking the plastic unit as well as the bitumen unit. So not just one, but 3 of those projects are really, really heavy in every size and measure that you can talk about. So from our perspective, what we've been learning about is if anything, is how to become more efficient in the way that we've been doing, because this work that has been done in the lab, working internally, we've been looking for every option to stay online on time and execute on behalf of what our investors. This is what we promised them. And so when we saw, for example, that we had issues with deadlines in the lab, and the lab was somewhat is going to extend, we immediately find out that we're going out and look for another site, an alternative site, in order to commission the unit. When we find out that there are a potential positive outcome for us to accelerate our commercialization phase, we didn't stop in commissioning the R2. We went straight to the Netherlands to test it. So if anything, what it tests us? It tests us. We learn how to become more efficient. We learn how to become more dynamic in the future, where is facing you with difficulties days in and days out, from supply chain, from issues that are heading towards you. I mean, this is what investors. This is why investors trust the money in the things that we've been doing, and for that reason, if anything, that's what I'm taking away. The fact that the Aduro team knows that we have to try and investigate every option in face of every challenge in order to become more efficient.
I just wanted to underline something Ofer mentioned and link it to the R2 location. So ultimately, we've we've of course mentioned in the past that we are building an expanded laboratory facility in London, Ontario. The work is still in progress. Our office space is complete, fully furnished. Everything is ready to go. The actual lab location is still pending certain construction elements. We were originally planning to house the R2 unit in London, right? But when we saw that construction would take a little bit more time, we did not stop and say, oh well, you know what, it's going to take another few months to be able to run the machine. We immediately started looking for alternatives, right? Where else can we put and run the R2 machines, whether it's plastic or bitumen? And I can tell you right now, it's not an easy feat to actually find industrial locations in Ontario. They're not as available as somebody would think. It's actually quite hard to find something, and to find something that would provide us with a short-term rent, right? Because we don't need it indefinitely. We need it for a little bit of time to start running the equipment as fast as we possibly can, because we all want the same goal at the end of the day. So we found this location in Sarnia. We locked down the lease. So there's operational elements outside of commissioning, outside of all of those technical aspects that I'm not sure investors fully are aware of. But ultimately, we didn't need to sound the alarms or anything because we found solutions, right? So I think this has proven that our team is quite agile and very capable of finding alternatives to any hurdle that they see, right? So, you know, we have battle scars that we keep internally, of course, but ultimately, I think every time we prove that we could find a solution to any problem. And they're going to continue. As a company operating in this space, we're going to be faced with issues and we're going to find solutions. It's how fast we get up, how fast we maneuver around them that is the key. And that's why I think investors has trusted us so far. And I think we'll continue to see that we're building progress forward and we're moving as fast as we can. I just wanted to kind of underline that point there.
My next question is, what is a realistic timeline from the current R2 plastics pilot to the semi-commercial one? What challenges do you envision with scaling up?
I think I completely understand where the mindset is of the questions are coming from. And if you just to remind the people, normally what we see out there is some kind of a development of some kind of a legacy approach. So there's hurdles in an approach, and there's an opportunity there to maybe to improve it, and then of course the scale up and moving forward from that perspective is a real issue. And so that is what the people are seeing. I feel and I dare say we're very, very different. First and foremost, this is a very new science, never been tested before. And so we're writing our own book and our own history there. But where is the driver for our optimism? The driver for our optimism comes from the fact that, as I mentioned, we qualified so many catalysts, we qualified so many hydrogen donors, we qualified so many certain different variety. That means that we have agile an ability to maneuver and work around. For that reason, the information that we're getting, we're feeling that the information that we're getting in, from the lab phase is so definitive that we could and we should be able to move it into the R2 and the R3. For the same optimism, we feel that we should maybe pay less attention on the length of time and look who is joining into the company to work with us. Even so, R1, R2 is not even running. So I'll put the Shell game changer in place. We have other discussions. Why would they do that? They do that because they know that the information we're generating, or even at the lower scale, is somewhat very optimistic as we're going. It's easier to work on the higher scale. And why is it? Because we are working at the lower energy phase. We're doing less invasive work. We qualified so many materials to help us change in case of elimination or changing of issues. What does it tell you? It gives you some optimism that you should be able to scale this thing in a strong way because the system is robust, basically. So I would turn and says, yes, take a look at the length that it takes to move from 1 to 2, but really take a look at the companies that are joining in as we are moving forward, because they're doing the work and they are not waiting for R2 to be happening. So bottom line is that we feel that by the time we'll be ready with R3, we already have some business deals that will help us to accommodate and move on R3. So for that reason, those companies will not just come to support the technology, they will come with some commercial engagement, which again entail in return some optimism of where this is going ahead. And everything that we see so far in the lab tells us that we're moving forward.
If I may add to that, Ofer, and I think this is critical here, because we see a lot of questions around scaling up, right? And we keep on answering those same questions, saying that, yes, scale up is a process, but we do not deem it as a top risk. We're actually very confident that scale up is going to go quite smoothly due to the points, of course, that Ofer mentioned, right? Lower severity, lower temperature. It creates a less invasive environment, which, of course, impacts the machinery and equipment that we're building. But like we said in the past, this is not exotic equipment. It's actually quite standard. It's not, these pilots or even commercial units have been built in one variety or variation or another by several other companies before. We're not reinventing the wheel, right? The secret sauce is the core process, the core technology, and all the parameters that we're actually becoming subject matter experts around. Our team is the best at what we do, right? Now, when people are thinking that scaling up is inherently a risk, whether it's low or medium or high, they're thinking a little bit in isolation that we're going at this on our own, which is not the case. We are ramping up our internal engineering department. Yes, we need engineers in-house, and we need to even onboard more and more engineers. But we're working with external engineering firms that are very high caliber, right? We are not sparing any commitments when it comes to the engineering aspect. We don't want to go at this alone, and we don't need to, right? Most companies out there actually work with an engineering partner. So when we partner with actually 2 engineering firms for the R2, these individuals, these companies have built things or pilots of the scale that are 50-fold what we're building here. When we go to R3, we're probably going to even expand even further. We're going to be working with engineering companies that have the expertise and know-how around something that's 10, 20 times the size that we're building. So, we shouldn't be thinking that this is Aduro, a company that is, 2 years public and is going to face hurdles. That's not how it's going to work, right? And I want to point as well at the Shell Game Changer agreement. Yes, there's funding. Yes, we're providing them with analysis and reports. But more importantly, from just the funding, they're providing technical expertise, right? Market know-how, market direction. So not only do we have our partners, engineering partners, we have access to partners outside of that, third-party stakeholders that are also there to answer any question, to help us, assist us during the process. So we're not going at this alone, right? So I think people need to just remember that as we move forward.
The ultimate goal is for you to build and expand commercial units with partners at 25 tons per day and expand them. How will you be able to do multi-unit of these, given the time it takes to build each commercial unit, given that it takes over a year to build each commercial unit?
I think the premise here is a little bit inaccurate. We are targeting a licensing model, right? We're working with partners that have the capabilities, either on the funding, the engineering, the build out, the location. They have everything they need to build these commercial units at scales that are 50, 100-fold to 25 tons per day, right? So yes, we have the ability to start small because we do want to work with smaller companies, but we're also discussing with companies that will have the need and capacity that is multiple folds our starting point of 20 tons per day, 25 tons per day. So the only issue or the only areas of concern, which we're not tremendously concerned of because we're working around them, is to get to the semi-commercial and to, of course, we might be looking to doing our first commercial unit on our own or with a partner or maybe several partners. Once we have the design and the operational commercial unit up and running, let's say for several months, we're up to replication mode, right? We have everything we need to hand off to a potential customer and for them to build out this equipment in a very timely basis, right? So that's going to come with sourcing for the material, exact specs, environmental analysis, potential financing and funding for the equipment. All of that is going to be key things to do for the first commercial unit. And we acknowledge that this is not going to be an easy job, but we're 100% equipped to do that, right? Now, when we're in replication mode, to go from 1 unit to 5, 10, 20, 50, as that comes along, we have to find the customers, of course, and build that pipeline. But it's really not as complicated as people perceive it to be, right? Like we said, this industry has been around for a very, very long time. What they've been missing, and the root cause behind a very low recycling rate in plastics, let's use plastic as an example, although we have different verticals, of course. But on plastics, I mean, recycling rates are sub 10%. They're actually closer to 6 to 9% globally. It's because the solution is missing. And even though the solution is missing, legacy technologies, other improvements are operational at very, very large scale, right? There's pilots out there. There's plants out there that other people are operating that are in the capacity of 300,000-400,000 tons a year. And there's really, they've been built. It takes a couple of years to do that for something of that scale. But the people that have built those units and are going to build other units are available to us and to others. So we really don't see a heavy lift on the replication side. It's going to be a lot smoother once we get to that first unit. So that's really how I see it. And I want to remind everybody, of course, we're focused on licensing. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have a great opportunity to start running your own plant if and when the opportunity comes, because there's a lot of money to be made, of course, for the company and the shareholder if we go down that route. But we're looking at really taking as much market share we possibly can at the right time. So we'll have to make those decisions when we get closer. But I'll let Ofer say the last words on that topic.
I also want to remind the investors that once you hit a customer, we differentiate between bringing new customer and then working within a customer. So once you hit a customer, every customer is different and every customer has his own goals. And Shell, publicly announced, for example, that they want to process, I think, 1 million tons per day. Was it in a year? Was it, Mina, that they announced? All I'm trying to say is that once you enter a customer, they have their own goals. And so if you have 2 or 3 of them, this is what we're targeting, you can see how each customer, it's not a small unit that will stay there. They're thinking projects, and you work with a customer to cater to this type of project. That's how we see it. This is the potential here, really. So on one hand, we have this pipeline to introduce ourselves to customers, but on the other hand, once you bring customer on board, well, really you're exposed to his needs, and you're building through your project his needs into it. And then from a certain point from a certain point, this customer is moving on in expansion internally, right? That's what they do. That's what this is their goals, to process as much as they could according to the mandate that their investors gave them.
When do you expect to start generating revenue from client testing programs? And what is the average size of such revenue per feedstock or per client?
Great question, Marius. And I'll take a first stab at this. Ultimately, revenue is starting as we speak, right? So we expect the last or the more recent financial statements coming out end of April to reflect some of that revenue. We've announced, of course, Shell Game Changer. We've announced Prospera. We've made the strategic decision to postpone charging or invoicing Prospera. We could have done that a lot earlier, but we made the decision to wait until R2 bitumen is up and running. We're very careful to have a great relationship with every single customer we have, right? So it's not about just how fast can we bring in, start invoicing these customers. We want to build a long-term relationship. Our end goal is to build a commercial pipeline, right? So it's very important for us to have a great relationship from the get-go. So straight answer, revenue is trickling in as we speak. In terms of range, I want to give you a ballpark figure. Ultimately, it's anywhere between $125,000 to $300,000 per potential customer or per engagement. Now, that is a ballpark. If I wanted to say, probably the majority would fit in there, but there are going to be some outliers, a potential few cases where there's going to be an arrangement with a potential stakeholder that has multiples of that upper range, right? Something that can go into, a million, several millions. It's all speculative at this stage, but there's different options for us other than just customer trials. We've been having a lot of discussions. The company has been really burning the midnight oil with engagement. So discussions are kind of quite varied at this point. So I don't want to simplify our potential stakeholder engagements into specifically just customer trial. We use that term just to simplify our, everybody's understanding. So if we were to just stick to a trial terminology, I would say the range that I gave you. But at the same time, getting funding in the company is quite important. We want to minimize dilution. It's quite important for us and other shareholders, of course. But the value add of an engagement is not only, or it doesn't have to be primarily just the money aspect, right? So we're careful to find the most value add potential to the company when we talk about engagement. And if that's not money, then it's something else. Again, with the ultimate goal of scaling to a commercial unit and building a commercial pipeline. So that's how we look at it as a company. We do try to get some funding, of course, from any discussion we have. It's important. It helps us minimize the need to go to market. It, of course, helps us accelerate as we want to, whether it's here or out of the Netherlands or potentially overseas elsewhere. So it's an important component, but the actual relationship and the goal towards commercialization and building the commercial pipeline is the primary goal for us.
How is Aduro planning to expand its investor base beyond its current retail small investor base? And when can we see that transpiring? So
with regard to that, although we do have a primarily retail shareholder base, I want to say it's very, very diverse, and it's a very, very strong shareholder base. That is partly because of the work that we've done to get out there and get in front of potential shareholders, but it's also partly due to the vetting process. When we open a raise, we make sure that we have significant demand beyond the numbers that we're looking to raise, first of all, so we can be selective. It's important for us that the strong base that we currently have gets stronger and does not get weakened by bringing in the wrong shareholders. I know that might not make a lot of sense to certain people, but it's very critical for us to bring in people that fully understand the story, have done enough diligence, are not following some random guidance from somebody else. We want people that come in with their eyes open, understand the timeline that we're working with, understand the opportunity, and that creates stability in the stock price, which is, proof is in the pudding for anybody that wants to go back and look at our chart, right? In a very, very difficult market, we've been quite stable. So I want to say, I am beyond thankful to our current shareholder base that has been treating us tremendously well. And, I want to say we think about our shareholders constantly, whether it's when we're doing another raise, we want to protect their interests, but as well when we're executing. We make sure that we remember the discussions we had, the presentations we've had with, of course, with you, Marish, and others. When we say something, we want to deliver against it. Even when there's something, there's headwinds or there's curveballs being thrown at us, we want to maneuver, around them as fast as we can to meet what we've promised. So that is important for us to kind of relay. But when we talk about changing our shareholder composition towards institutional hands, we are and have been in discussions with several large institutions. A lot of major names have been in discussion with us. We've been followed by them. We do have follow-up calls with several of them as well. We have very strong relationships. I think it's going to come down to meeting their criteria of market cap and liquidity. So we are slowly getting there. Of course, it's not going to happen overnight, but we're slowly building our market cap. We're unlocking more and more value for our shareholders. The liquidity is increasing in the stock, and we can only build that by executing, right?
Well, what's the typical market cap that you hear that is required of these institutions?
So some of the caliber of the institutions we're talking to are looking at 500 million plus. Other are talking anywhere between 200 and 5, right? And some are actually talking about $1 billion plus. We have the potential, of course, to meet all of those criteria, right? From the medium, small to the largest of them. But it's quite a great feeling for us to be even in discussions We've had discussions as long as, I want to say, 12 to 14 months ago, and they've never, they realize the timeline that it's going to take, and they realize the market dynamics, of course. But from our discussions, they've been very, very positive. I think both parties are very, optimistic that we could reach those milestones in due time. I think next year is going to be a critical year when we are focusing on getting R3 up and running in 2024. I think really that milestone is going to do a lot for our market cap. But between now and then, I think our engagement with potential customers, the results we're going to be getting from R2, all the things we promised, we continue to work on non-dilutive funding. We continue to work on engagement. I think we're going to unlock a lot of value. And now that we start, let's say we end Q1 with a strong balance sheet, with a strong cash position, I think we're going to be off to the races in the next 9 months. I'm very confident in what we're doing. I can't promise the market situation. I mean, it's quite up and down. I think 2023 is going to be challenging from a market standpoint before everything gets calmed down and we start seeing better days ahead of us. But I think we're going to do completely well, actually completely fine in 2023 as we execute. And that's partly why we wanted to start the year, or at least leave Q1 with a strong balance sheet. It's very critical for us to go in with a position of power in our discussions as we try to leverage the money we have to get more money that's non-dilutive, as we engage with partners. All of that is quite critical. So it's a chicken or egg, and we need to balance all of these aspects as we maneuver.
Why would R3 have any sort of impact on the market cap?
So as Ofer said, right, R3 is going to be at tons per day. It's the step before we start talking commercial engagement. So yes, the continuous flow is equally important in my books as an engagement tool and as a discussion tool to start locking down commitments. R3 is what essentially is more of a, putting the period at the end, a conclusion to it all, right? So now we've seen R3, we're blown away with the results. We see the core chemistry process, the proof is in the pudding, but now we see the same being applied on a tons per day basis. What other questions are left to start talking about the next step, right? So that's how I see it, of course. I'm more on the finance side of things, but I've been involved in many, many discussions. I think it's definitely from a shareholder standpoint, from an institutional standpoint. I've heard from several very influential people that, the second R3 is up and running, we're all over this, right? And these are people that can change the composition of the company shareholder base, not a single individual, but more of an organization.
If R3 is such a big deal in your eyes and in some investors' eyes, people are going to want to know what's the realistic timeline for R3.
I think the realistic timeline is sometime in 2024. Ofer's mentioned something, and we need to be a little bit careful on what we say and how we say it. We're working on certain operational, I want to say advancements, innovation outside of the core technology that might shave off some time from our timeline. It might change how we move forward. And that's critical. So we don't want to be optimistic. We don't want to be pessimistic either, right? And there's many parts that are moving alongside at the same time, right? So yes, R2 being up and running is going to help us significantly in our discussions around non-dilutive funding for R3, on our discussions around, potential partnerships for R3. And the faster we get across that milestone, we move into the next one. So we're working on several projects side by side. I don't want to point to a singular event as the Holy Grail. Ultimately, I think the R2 commissioning is one of the major milestones in the life cycle of the company. I know people say, oh, it's just continuous flow. It's going to be a dramatic tool for us to move forward, right? So I always look at everything as a life cycle of the company, not just, a 3-6 month window. So this is going to move the needle significantly. Us fully funding R3 is going to move the needle significantly. Us engaging partners in the next 6 to 9 months, stakeholders, again, we're talking to very, very big names. each one of them could be a company maker. So, of course, discussions always take longer than you hope for and than you expect. But if we were to land one or several of these discussions into something more formal, a dramatic unlock, in my opinion, and of course, R3 being another dramatic unlock. So there's no lack of potential catalyst in the next 9 months in 2023, and there's going to be no shortage in 2024, right? We still remain to be, in our opinions, inexpensive. We don't think that we have reached the full valuation of our current state, but that's fine. The market will catch up on its own time. So as long as we keep on moving forward, unlocking more value from our perspective, the market is going to catch up, and it might even surpass our expectations as we start building out. And the overall environment is critical as well, right? So although 2023 might be a year that is a little bit more tight from a global macro level, usually once you surpass this period, things actually develop quite nicely afterwards, right? So you get a little bit of a lull, but the markets are cyclical, so it might actually work quite well for us in 2024. But I don't want to really speculate on the marketplace. I just want to make sure that we understand that we have a path forward. It's very, very defined. We're quite agile as a company, and any hurdle that we get thrown with, we find ways around it, and we keep on moving forward. And every time we pass one milestone, we look back and we're quite happy with the way we handle these things. There's always lessons learned, but we don't lose too much time. We don't lose too much resources, right? Which is, I've seen companies do tremendously badly because they hit a hurdle and they just deal with it in an inappropriate manner, or the best that they could see. But hindsight is 20/20. So I think I continue to be impressed with our team, and I think we're going to keep on moving forward in the same method or methodology.
What's unique about Aduro is that you guys really deliver on what you say you will do. And I was wondering if you have instances where you gained a shareholder who followed you and saw that, hey, they delivered on the things that they said they were going to deliver, and as a result of this, I'm becoming a shareholder. Did you ever have situations like this?
I think I've seen more situations where shareholders have increased their shareholdings based on our actions and our discussions. So I think there's a level of transparency that we've tried to kind of uphold too. We do not want to, we want to talk the talk, but also walk the walk. And it's quite important for us to deliver a message that we know that we can deliver against. And I don't want that to be perceived as being overconfident. In no way or shape am I being overconfident. I'm ultimately saying, what? We've handled a lot of hurdles and we'll continue to handle them. Business and operations is never void of hurdles. That's the ABC of running a company, and growing a company of our scale is not easier by a long shot. So I think it's delivering the right message, delivering the right expectations, and working day and night to execute on those elements. And actually, caring about shareholders is something that I think many companies undermine. They perceive it somewhat of, you're going into a speculative position, you're taking a risk, you know what you're doing, you're investing the money. It's your call at the end of the day. We don't look at investors like that. We look at them as partners. We look at them as, we look at us building this company alongside our shareholders, and we appreciate their support. And that support is not only in money, in the fundings, but we get emails that are actually, some emails I got recently in the past 3-4 weeks have been so positive, and it gives me personally a boost, right? Because the job is not easy. We're not a humongous sized team. We're building it as we go, but I think everyone along this team has been working, 7 days a week. That's not easy to do for a long period of time. So these words these kind words of positive reinforcement, it keeps us going. Of course, we keep each other going, which is another thing I want to say is quite unique about this team, right? We work well together. We complement each other's skills, but we're also quite positive because we know the end goal here, right? The end goal. I don't think every other company or every other team is blessed to have the same dynamics, right? Because I've worked with other companies, I've been part of other teams, and I want to say, in the startup world, it's not always easy, right, to find the right mix and fit with people. I think really that's half the battle, right?
Can you compare Aduro's technology with that of Lysella?
I did have some comments to me now on the other end, but I'll leave it for later, because it's there is a lot to say about us creating options, and the investors gave us mandate to move forward, and so we care so much for that sense on the investors, that we are looking for options and care, looking for ways to move those hurdles as a team. Even in the financial side, we plan the way we're planning our finance, the way we're moving the share structure. It's all there to see the fact that we're not doing all kind of a nonsensical activity there and always looking uphill. It's getting the trust of the investors. So there's a lot of planning in every aspect of the company, day in and day out, and we've been challenged by this. But us for looking forward and creating the proactive activity, proactively thinking about those hurdles, help us to move forward. And so I think the bottom line is that as a team, I think we're working to create options to the companies all day in and day out. And so that's the investors would know that we are actually executing on time, not because we said so, but because we managed to move along so many hurdles. But I'll stop there, and I'll speak about Lysella. Lysella came back again, respectful, very large company, just like many others. I mean, in the space, we don't compare, and I think we said that, to a particular company. So if you remember in the slides, we show an approach, very different approaches to deal with most waste volume of waste processing. The mechanical upscaling, or the solvent, or the thermal approach. And beneath each approach, there are certain technologies, and they are somewhat, if you look at the DNA of each approach, they somewhat belongs to that approach. So pyrolysis, belongs to the thermal side, and it has different variation, and the mechanical has different variation as well, and also the solvents. So first and foremost, and this is really, really important, Aduro provide a fourth leg, okay, a unique, distinct approach. And that approach belongs, and we see that it's been more and more and more accepted by organizations, and I'm expecting some news about it in the year come in, about that type of approach. So first and foremost, Aduro is providing an approach. The Aduro technology below that approach, is so far providing a lot of information that, or solutions to chemical and economical limitations that other companies are suffering, for example. But we always said that in many, many cases, we don't see companies like Lysella as a competitor. We will simply work with them. Whatever they reject, we will take. So I don't think we want to be in this comparable of each technology and say, oh yeah, we can win here, or we can win. No, we want to work, and because think of it, we mention again and again that we have different variation that we can use the technology for, and we can adapt the technology to a certain situation. Different types of catalysts, different type of hydrogen donors, different type of multi-stream, single stream. Issues on contamination. We have a lot of knowledge on contamination. That means that we can adjust ourselves to a certain situation. So we see Lysella and Dow Chemical and Quantafuel and every other company there right now working in that space as possible collaborator. What we see our additional advantage on this is that we think we can work in areas that they would not work because of lack of regulation, for example, or size, minimum size. So you have to take so much of material, and then you end up taking a city, and you cannot take a city. So you need smaller scales of whatever sort. So I just want the audience to think of us in different, in that range, and not specifically on competition of one by one. And this information is in our website. It's there. We've been putting ourselves in the line and offer that type of thinking, and we put companies in different areas for that reason. And we are very honest about it. And the reason I'm saying I'm so strong about the definitive information that we have already in the lab is because it's distinctly different than anything else that we've seen so far. And I guarantee you, Mariusz, we received emails from active investors left, right, and centers, not in the last 2 years, but in the last 10 years so far.
I don't have any more questions. Do you have any final thoughts that you guys would like to share, whether it is about what people can expect in the future or recent press releases or anything that you have on your mind?
I just want to say that I think, we've started 2023 on a great footing. We're closing out Q3 in a tremendous solid base. I couldn't be happier with the raise that we are about to close any day now. And I want to say, like, the investors, I welcome the investors that are joining us in this raise. I welcome the investors that are coming back again and increasing their position to keep on joining us. And I just want to tell everybody that we fully appreciate everybody that's trusts us with their investment and joins the company in the path forward. We all have a major goal of really kind of changing the way waste plastic is dealt with. It's going to have a tremendous benefit on the globe, on society. I think if we could change the dynamics of the current marketplace, we're all going to win, whether shareholders or just consumers or plastic manufacturers. So we're working on something that is tremendously valuable to everybody around us. And that is, we have our eye on the end goal here. Everything is running as well as we could possibly expect. Maneuvering, of course, around some of the hurdles, but the team is in very high spirit and we continue to push forward. And I think investors have a lot to look forward to for the remainder of 2023. There's several things we're working on. We don't like to really promise anything before we have a line of sight on it. So we want to be very careful as we tell people what things are, what things are progressing. But as soon as we can share anything, we'll be doing that publicly, of course, for all shareholders at the same time. But once again, thank you, Mariusz, for spending the time having these calls, gathering this information, whether it's questions from the public or from other areas. So we appreciate all the questions that you deliver to us, and we will continue to address them as they come. And we're always available, of course, for our shareholders, whether they want to connect with us directly or through Mariusz or any other means. We're happy to engage with you as much as we possibly can. Of course, we got to do the job and the background, but we're always happy to engage with our shareholders. Thank you. I
want to say that really the investors has been trusting us with execution. And we've done it in 2022. And we've been focusing on execution, and we turn every stone in order to meet those milestones that we promised to the investors. And we're not immune at all. We see the market, we feel the market, we know that the market is tough, but market is not everything. The investors just trust us with execution, with moving forward. So my message is that we knows that we are working on execution. We understand what's going on around us. We're doing very, very careful planning, but you should know that we are working on execution, and that's kind of the final maybe message in it. We are working with the hurdles. We are not immune to the hurdles, but this is our prime and main character. So when they join in today at the current round, we're doing everything that we can in order to add value to this. And that's the message I think investors should leave. We should leave when we close the discussion.